Alright everyone, we have to talk about North Korea again. Things on the peninsula have not largely improved. It's not exactly science figuring out why that's the case. You've got a situation where North Korea kinda sorta is friendly with the Chinese, and Jinping kinda sorta tolerates them. Not as much as in the past, but still doesn't, I guess, want them bombed back to the Stone Age. Meanwhile, you've got, of course, Little Kim in North Korea constantly threatening all of his neighbors, including, at least sporadically, the Chinese themselves. Trump has now said openly the era of patience with North Korea is over, coming, of course, a couple weeks ago, saying the era of strategic patience failed. He's actually totally right on that. Think what you will about, like, the idea of striking Assad's forces. I oppose it. Some people support it. His polling numbers went up after he bombed that first airfield, which was honestly retarded. People don't understand, I think, how things are working in the Middle East. But on North Korea, we actually have the opportunity to do some good. If we were to lay waste to Kim Jong-un's forces and reunify the peninsula, it would be a great thing for millions of people. When you've got all sorts of people tortured or imprisoned or oppressed in general, as 99% of the North Korean population is, it's hard to ruin such a nation. In states where you've got stability, where you've got someone who is an authoritarian figure like Assad, like Gaddafi, there's still a possibility that after you march in, or after you bomb things, or after you run a no-fly zone, what happens is what happened in Libya or Syria, which is the strong-arm dictator is the only thing that was holding the nation together enough for there to be marginal prosperity. Both Libya and Syria were more or less, for their regions, prosperous nations until they were interfered with. And then you get people coming in like ISIS who are worse. And then you get refugee crisis, you get migrant boat crisis to Italy, you get all of these other problems. In North Korea, though, because it is, you can't scrape the bottom of the barrel and find North Korea. You have to burrow into the rotting wood actually underlaying that slime. That's the North Korean state. It's impossible to make it worse. Impossible. ISIS would probably do a better job of managing North Korea. There'd probably be more liberty if ISIS did run it. And nobody worries about, like, Islamic extremists moving into the Korean peninsula anyway, so that's really off the table. In North Korea, we've got a situation. Some libertarians, some of my fellow libertarians, ignore this fact. And they say, well, the U.S. can't play world police, intervention is bad, blah, blah, somehow it's our fault what happens in Korea. That's not the case. North Korea makes repeated threats against our allies in the region and repeated threats against us. And while they don't have the capability to actually attack, like, the mainland U.S., they're not actually going to use an atom bomb on Los Angeles or San Francisco because they can't. They could do that against South Korea or Japan. We have to understand that in the minds of the North Korean leadership, South Korea doesn't exist. That is, it's simply an extension of the DPRK that happens to be rogue. It happens to have undergone what they would class as an anti-revolutionary sort of uprising, that the South Koreans are controlled by evil pig dog America, and so as a result, if North Korea wanted to launch preemptive strikes, which they are frighteningly capable of doing, it would be somehow their sovereign right to do so because they see that other half of the peninsula as just theirs in waiting. Likewise, South Korea's leadership. The official state line of South Korea is much the same towards the DPRK. It is essentially a rogue, commie-controlled region that is really technically under their control. And if there's going to be reunification, it has got to be under South Korean leadership. The U.S., as far as military muscle, can take the fore. As far as diplomacy, we would need to take a distant back seat. The Japanese would be further to the front than us. The Chinese. We would have to take a back seat, otherwise we risk the ire of people who have been told through propaganda for half a century now that the United States is interested in marching into their country, enslaving them, raping their women, bashing their children against rocks, and completely burning everything to the ground because we're evil. We're horrible, despicable monsters. They don't have the same degree of propaganda aimed at the South Koreans. They see them as basically their stupid brothers who embraced the Americans and are now pawns. In other words, having South Korean soldiers show up in North Korea probably wouldn't cause people to flee into the woods and kill themselves. Having American soldiers doing that probably would. But we could certainly flatten their air fields. We could certainly destroy their naval and air assets, which would basically open it up for South Korea to do what they want. Minus the artillery on the DPRK, but here's the trick question. What happens if the DPRK does decide at some point, because they get a multi-stage nuke, because they end up with long-range atomic capabilities? What happens if they do develop? And we're not talking about, oh, next year they'll have World War III style amounts of nuclear armaments. But we're talking some years down the road. If we keep kicking the can, they will eventually obtain probably both of these things. What happens then? Now we cannot intervene. It would be impossible. The trigger for war in the Korean Peninsula will be when they get very, very close, provably, to constructing such a thing. They're getting fairly close now. Their new missile systems are better than the old missile systems that they have. They don't have multi-stage nuclear weapons, but they may get boosted weapons at any time. It's not, they're on par with where we were in the mid to late 1940s. They only need one half-step technological leap to have boosted weapons and the ability to potentially put them on missiles. At least intermediate range missiles that could hit Japan, South Korea, most of China. They may not be able to hit us, but all these other countries are going to want us to get involved anyway. We may end up with the situation where our own leadership here in the United States says, well, maybe we don't want to deal with this situation. And meanwhile, we've got South Korea and Japan saying, get involved, because otherwise the only other people that will are going to be the Chinese. And the South Koreans may not want China on their doorstep any more than China wants Korea on its doorstep reunified. I think that the South Korean leadership would accept that more if there was reunification. They'd have more manpower, a larger land area, probably privy to much greater natural resources. North Korea is basically sitting on a mountain of rare earth minerals it can't even half extract. I've seen some individuals claim that what the West wants from North Korea is access to cheap minerals. I happen to disagree, because if there was reunification, you'd have South Korean living standards very quickly take hold in North Korea, and the amount that you would have to pay to get those extracted would be far higher than North Korea extracting them, even if they can only ship them to China for resale. The Chinese reselling North Korean minerals sell it to the world stage a lot cheaper than South Korea would be able to. The Japanese are the only holdout here, because they've got all that mineral-rich sludge lying in various spots in the ocean that they claim, and they've suggested vacuuming this sludge up and then semi-refining it, and of course they can do that inexpensively because it's so concentrated. Now, other than that, you're looking at North Korea, and the tech world alone would love it if there was Korean reunification, even if they would have to, I think, pay more, because there'd be more stability as far as the product is concerned. But this isn't economic in nature. The reason why people want to go and liberate North Korea is due to what Kim Jong-un and his people say on a nearly daily basis about everybody else in the world. They are proclaiming that they will annihilate the United States. Now, they don't have the ability to do that, but they do have the ability to attack our forces in the region. They proclaim their willingness and intent to annihilate the rogue South Korean leadership, the evil Japanese, and those damn Chinese backstabbers on a regular basis. I don't know why Jinping is so caught up about this. I would think, if I were Jinping, my line would be, go ahead and liberate North Korea. We're not going to get involved. You're going to be the one expending your blood and time and effort and weapons doing so. We're going to go off and do string of pearls. We're going to go work with Pakistan and India and build more factories in East Africa, because we've got our own middle class now, and we can no longer make ends meet, because these other less developed countries will be glad, really, to sell their manufactured goods to the West if we slip up. Economically speaking, China's trying to navigate through quite troubled waters right now, and this is another reason why I've proclaimed that China may very well just be a paper tiger that ends up fucking itself. That's because their entire economy is driven by, we export cheap crap to the West. Cheap goods, cheap resources, cheap food, blah, blah, blah. They need to build a shit ton of factories in less fortunate nations in order to do that now. India is quickly rising as a regional power within South Asia. They're capable now of manufacturing anything the West wants. One slip up from China and that will end up happening. India will probably leave BRICS and say, oh yeah, well, we're rejecting multiculturalism, we're a Hindu nation now. They probably get along more with like a Trumpite than they would with Obama the globalist or something like that. Meanwhile, Jinping, he loved Obama because he could push him around. North Korea, meanwhile, sits there and threatens everybody, including the Chinese. They threatened them after the Chinese didn't have a problem with the last round of sanctions. Now we've slapped another round on them. I'm wondering, what is there left to sanction in North Korea at this point? What exactly is there to sanction? They've been sanctioned up the ass already. They basically execute a U.S. prisoner, Warmbier. And we haven't done anything about it so far. We've flown a few aircraft carriers offshore, and we tell the North Koreans we're very upset. We condemn this action, and nothing gets done. And it's about time that we do, because at some point we're going to have no choice but to attack North Korea. At some point it becomes a necessity. There won't be any other option. We should preempt things before that happens. We need to realize that North Korea is not a situation that's going to solve itself. And I say this as a person who's anti-war. We shouldn't be dicking around the Middle East. We should bring all of our resources out of there and put it around North Korea. Really give them something to be frightened about and hope that they fire the first shot. And once those shots start firing, then we flatline every piece of artillery, we flatline their tanks, we destroy their airfields, and we march on in. We let the ROK reunify the peninsula. We will sit back and provide as much air and sea support as necessary. They need to be the ones that have the boots on the ground. They're the only ones with a legitimate claim to reunify the peninsula because they happen to be from essentially the same culture, nonetheless not overthrown by communist rhetoric. They would have to be the ones to do that. Anyone proclaim, oh, the U.S. should occupy North Korea, that would be such a terrible idea. It'd be such a bloodbath. A lot of North Korean civilians would die, and a hell of a lot of U.S. soldiers would die. Because some of these people would end up disappearing off into tunnels and caves and going Viet Cong mode, and you'd have tens of thousands of U.S. casualties. The ROK moves in, probably a lot of them resist doing so. Because very quickly they realize, oh, shit, it was actually Kim oppressing us the entire time. Look how wealthy South Korea is. It'll be a little bit like Vietnam for a while, only this time, you think the Chinese are going to Zerg rush the North Korean border? You know, it's just not going to happen. So that's what we should do. I happen to support Trump in the general sense of backing off of the must strategic patience crap and going the more militaristic route. Because there's really no other choice. Not because we need to safeguard the U.S., we're going to get nuked or something. We're not going to get nuked by the North Koreans, but the South Koreans might. And I don't really want to see a bunch of dead South Korean civilians any more than I'd want to see, like, Vancouver or any other city along the Pacific coast of the North American continent get hit. They could attack the Canadians. They could attack us. They have the ability already to put chemical warheads on their Typo-Dong missiles. As far as their no-dong missiles, those are more short-ranged. I guess there's a reason behind the naming scheme that they have. But every missile they have seems to be a dong, which is the funniest part. The odd thing being, aren't South Korean missiles named similarly, though? Or wouldn't they be because, you know, Korean language? I don't know. I'm just taking a shot in the dark on that one. We need to do something about North Korea, though, at some point. Warmongering aside, can you really make the situation worse? And is there not a justification for intervention when another country has openly threatened you for years at a time and actually conducted at least small-scale attacks and incursions on at least one of its neighbors. I would say that's justification. We are allies with South Korea and with Japan. Now, we're a major trading partner, don't forget as well, with China. And North Korea will threaten them too. Yeah, I don't think it'd be great for the world's economy if Beijing did get hit by an atomic weapon. In theory, they could drop one on Beijing. They are close enough. Their planes would have that ability. Even if it probably gets shot out of the skies, you don't want to see all those hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops get destroyed by the DPRK either. That could happen. What if Kim just goes fucking nuts one day and orders an attack on China? He could end up doing that. It's not beyond the realm of possibility. That's about all. Peace out.